whole part of it is to try and deal with it. If it is something really an unhandruggable, sometimes that zero tolerance approach to burn it out, particularly with Italian ryegrass and blackgrass, is the best option in the long term, you know. And finally, just I'd like to say, many people just leave it at that, but the really, really important part is go back and revisit the field a few weeks later, because there could be some plants down low that will have come through later on as well. So you can actually miss some as well. So I think that's really, really useful to do as well.
Farmers worry about the weather and the drop in prices of grain on the international markets, but there's very little a farmer can do about these factors. A more striking risk to all tillage farmers is from grass weeds. Even though these weeds may come from outside the farm, there's plenty all farmers can do within their farm gate to ensure grass weeds do not establish. You're listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We would really appreciate it if you could listen, follow, and give us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by John Mahon, an advisor in Teagasc, and Vijaya Bhaskar, a weed researcher in Teagasc, to discuss all about grass weeds and how important it is to be vigilant at this time of the year to prevent spread. John, I'd like to come to you first. You were a key part of the ECT project, specifically looking at grass weeds. What grass weeds in particular were you looking at, and do you think they were of a particular problem all the way throughout Ireland?
Well, Michael, we were looking at the obvious ones, the likes of wild oats and the bromes, particularly sterile brome. Predominantly they were presented to us, but we were also looking at canary grass. We had blackgrass and Italian ryegrass sampling as well. And laterally in the project rat's tail fescue, and we even had a few samples of herbicide-resistant annual meadowgrass cropped up. So I suppose of those, I would say they all should be categorized as problematic. Numerically wise, I suppose the wild oats and sterile brome are on most farms, but we have more control options with them. But for the likes of blackgrass and Italian ryegrass, they can explode into a problem very quickly. So they are quite problematic on farm. I suppose rat's tail fescue I mentioned there, and it is becoming more predominant, and particularly in minimum disturbance systems. But the problem with that one was we've very little control options, particularly chemical control with it. So that's how I'd categorize them, I suppose.
So you've lots of different weeds there, and I suppose the ones we're more familiar with, like the wild oats and sterile brome. The other ones you mentioned there, which maybe might be a little bit newer around the place, do you think? Or what's your impression working with some of the farmers, and I suppose generally speaking across the industry? Do you think those really problematic weeds are under control, do you think, in the country, or do you think more work is needed?
In a nutshell, we probably need to be doing more on it, and there's a number of reasons I'd say that. Like for years, we've solely relied on chemical control to deal with our grassweed problems in Ireland. And I mean, we had been doing pretty well and a reasonable job on it, but for a number of reasons now, we're losing our efficacy, and that's probably down to overuse and or continuous use maybe in the same fields, particularly in a winter barley situation. And secondly, we have resistance starting to build up on particular chemistries as well, which Vijay will talk about in later. But on top of that, we're losing chemistry. The likes of IPU is gone as well, which was a mainstay. And we may be set to lose more over the coming years. But a second part of it as to why we're becoming a little bit more problematic, I suppose the move towards minimum disturbance has allowed the pace of development probably of grass weeds to increase a little bit. It's not the main reason. We do get grass weeds in a plough-based system as well, but a bit of a lack of knowledge on the identification and what you have to do with the grass weeds would probably be what I would key as the main problem and also the main way out of this as well. So with a better understanding of those between farmers and agronomists and how to build in an integrated cultural control into the whole system, I'd say is probably the key to what we're looking at.
But I suppose, John, is there do you think there's more weeds across the country now than there was maybe 5 years ago, do you think?
there's possibly some more. There's better identification now, I would say, Michael. So how much more? I don't know. Maybe VJ and the number of samples that are coming into Oak Park might show some light on it. But I'd say there's better vigilance now than there was, and probably better knowledge. Yeah.
Okay, and Vijay, I want to bring you in there as John was saying there. I mean, you're a permanent researcher here in Oak Park now, looking at grass weeds and weeds, I suppose, in a general sense, and you're looking at them in terms of identification and testing. In terms of the weeds that are coming through, where exactly are those weeds coming from, Vijay? Are they all across the country or from particular areas?
So, Michael, I have been receiving samples for identification or testing almost from all tillage counties. So, like John pointed out, we have the wild oats and bromes are the most widespread weeds. But over the last few years, there has been a huge increase in invasive species like Canary grass and blackgrass and Italian ryegrass. So I would say, in terms of tillage counties, Wexford, Kilkenny, and Kildare are hotspots for wild oat, especially the likes of resistant wild oats. Whereas Meath, Dublin, Kildare are hotspots for the likes of blackgrass and Italian ryegrass. Having said that, resistant blackgrass and Italian ryegrass are now present in every tillage county. And if you take the likes of bromes and even for that reason, Canary grass is now present in all tillage counties between Louth, Wexford, and Cork Triangle.
Okay, so they're all over the place, and people can't be despondent to them. In terms of, I think you said that grass weeds that outcross are more likely to develop this complex resistance actually relatively fast. So do you mean by outcrossing as in that they pollinate with different plants rather than pollinate with themselves? Because you look at grass weeds and they all have the anthers coming out and they all kind of look the same when they kind of get to that. But are you saying some will only cross-fertilize with another plant, whereas others will fertilize itself, if you like? Is that the way of it?
I suppose, Michael, it has to do with the weed biology. As you know, some grass weeds are self-pollinators and some are cross-pollinators. Self-pollinators, as the name suggests, pollination occurs within the same plant, so there is a little genetic diversity, which reduces the speed of resistance genes within the population. But if you take cross-pollinators, as the name suggests, pollination occurs with other plants of the same species. So there is a high level of genetic diversity present within the population, which speeds up the spread of resistance genes within the population. So to sum up, Michael, once a weed develops resistance through mutation, that trait is implanted in the genetic makeup of the plant and passed to next generation. So with self-pollinators, the resistant trait is passed through seed. But if you take cross-pollinators, the resistant trait is spread through gene or pollen flow, in addition to seed that are written to the soil seed bank. So that's why the cross-pollinators like blackgrass and Italian ryegrass are resistance prone compared to the likes of spring wild oats or bromes. Genes can move from plant to plant or among resistance and sensitive plant, exchanging genetic information, which increases the frequency of resistance present within the population, allowing the herbicide to selectively select those resistant individuals when the same modes of action used repetitively. So that's why cross-pollinators are more dangerous than in terms of resistance compared to self-pollinators.
Okay, and so you can actually stack those resistant traits very quickly back into the same plant.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So they're the ones that are of particular interest, as you say, the likes of the blackgrass and the Italian ryegrass, of which we might come to it later, but they're showing lots of resistance here in Ireland. John, coming back to you there, would it be fair to say, and Vijay kind of mentioned a little bit, that there's lots of these problematic populations all the way across the country, or nearly in every county, I suppose, but is it down to nearly a kind of a parish kind of basis now that there's you couldn't be sure that within a couple of miles of yourself that there isn't some of these really problematic populations close to you?
I'd reiterate what Vijay has said there, but during the course of the ECT project, the general consensus was that for problematic grass weeds like blackgrass, they were confined to a few areas of the country. In particular, but and even a funny thing at one of the crop walks, even which was not one of those areas, I've had it said to me that sure there's none of that stuff in this area, but I think that's a fierce, dangerous assumption to make as like there are so many simple ways that it can move around, transfer itself around the country, and the likes of imported straw this autumn is a prime example. We would expect that there might be more of an explosion in the next 12 months of grass weeds which have been imported into the country. But sure, even the likes of buying machinery, buying a baler or a combine and moving it from one county to another, So my guess is that it's in every parish, and my assumption is always that they're there, that they just haven't been detected. And if people are vigilant and they don't have them, well and good, but just make the assumption that it is rather than it isn't in the county or the parish.
Okay, and I suppose there's other ways of it getting across. You can have birds, and you can have combines, and you can have balers, and people are traveling a long ways for land nowadays. But I think it'd be fair to say, John, that the majority of fields out there are still clean from infection. There's like blackgrass, for instance, isn't in every field, and most fields actually don't have it at all. You might just give us a few pointers as regards some of the practical things farmers can make sure are in place to prevent that weed coming onto the farm in the first place.
Vigilance is, I suppose, has to be the key. You must be aware of how you can transport grass weeds into your farm. As I said, I've mentioned the likes of straw. There can be slurry or dung if you have an import arrangement with a neighbouring farmer. I mean, the ideal situation is that the straw that entered that dairy farm or beef farm beside you used your own straw, so you know what you're getting back. But vigilance, I suppose, is the key to it from that point of view. Machinery always crops up, Michael. The likes of balers and combines are the obvious ones for bringing in any sort of a grass weed into the farm. But there are other non-obvious machinery ways. Now, I have come across during the project, even the likes of the stand on a drawbar are a great little place for grass weeds to sit and move from farm to farm as well. I had another case where someone was particularly turning on a headland with a jeep and used to drive in on it and drag out a few wild oats on the bumper of the jeep and transfer them onto another farm. So I mean, there are lots and lots of means. You mentioned birds. People have carried them from boots on their boots, moving from farm to farm. One I'd like to mention though is the likes of Home Safe Seed. I mean, certified seed has a guarantee that they're free of wild oats, and they've made big moves there, even with the likes of catch crop seed. But if you are using Home Safe Seed, just be aware that the onus is on you, that it was grass weed free in the first place.
And Vijay, to bring you back in there, John mentioned some of the really good practices there to keep weeds on the farm, but he also mentioned that there has been some improvement with people being able to identify some of these grass weeds. But if a person or a farmer is unsure, what sort of help is available to a farmer?
So, Michael, I suppose identifying mature grass weeds when they flower or have seededs visible is relatively easier. So the ECT project has developed a number of good identification keys for the likes of wild oat, brooms, blackgrass, and Italian ryegrass. And all of these videos could be accessed via www.teagasc.ie/ECT. The local advisor could help. The Bayer has a good weed ID keys, and perhaps if they have difficulties in identification, they could send us the sample so we may able to help them. I'm also using this question to stress if farms have uncontrolled weeds in tillage crop this harvest, it is more crucial than ever to sample seeds to determine the sensitivity status of their population and mitigate the problem with the right herbicide and integrated approaches.
So what you're saying is that if If a farmer goes out to a field to see lots of grass weeds or some grass weeds that the farmer thought they were able to control, they have an idea what they are, but they weren't controlled, to gather up some samples and send them down to you here in Oak Park, and we should be able to test them as part of a project.
So we will be able to test as a part of the Evolved Grassweed project. So if the farms with the blackgrass and Italian ryegrass should be considered as a resistant suspect with the likes of wild oat or bromes or canary grass, it would provide a valuable information. So exactly, Michael. So if they have uncontrolled weeds, send us a sample. We would be able to test and get back with the sensitivity result.
Okay. And you're doing a lot of resistance work, but you're also doing some other work in terms of monitoring how an escaped weed can actually produce seed. You might give us an idea about some of that research work you're doing with Italian ryegrass at the moment, and the levels of seed that it can produce where the plant is uncontrolled.
So, Michael, for me, Italian ryegrass is more dangerous than blackgrass because they have the capacity to develop resistance, not just with the likes of Axial and Pacifica. Even at sometimes some of the population, we are seeing that they can show tolerance to glyphosate. So we are doing some trials with the field trials with the Italian ryegrass. What we are seeing is their ability to explode in population when given enough space. So a single plant in a non-competitive environment may produce over 20 tillers and close to 7,000 seeds.
Come again, how many seeds?
More than 7,000 seeds.
From one seed to 7,000. Wow.
Yes, and these seeds will be returned to the soil to reinfect your land if you don't put a proper containment program.
Okay, and the longevity of those seeds, Vijay, how long would you expect Italian ryegrass to last in the soil if that was allowed to happen?
The seed decline is rapid, but still it's up to 5 years, Michael.
Okay. And would you be any more worried about this year, given the fact that it's relatively wet, there's patchy kind of crops, and people might maybe be tempted to, I suppose, maybe skip some herbicide control in areas where there's really no crop, and to give a lot of space for some of these grass weeds to flourish?
Yes, because with very little, even in winter crops, whatever has gone in, very little pre-emergence has also gone in. So there will be more grass weed problems, especially with the likes of annual meadowgrass. And if you have the likes of blackgrass and Italian ryegrass, I think they might explode in numbers. And we need to have a proper containment program.
What would you suggest in that scenario?
If you have a blackgrass and Italian ryegrass, without a doubt, a zero tolerance approach is very important. If you try to manage blackgrass and Italian ryegrass, we have seen in the UK, we will lose the battle. So if you have blackgrass and Italian ryegrass, drastic measures, old cropping, spraying off with glyphosate, all measures are very critical. A zero tolerance approach is mandatory, I suppose.
Yeah, so I suppose for some of those areas that would have very little of any crop in it, and you did have some of those particularly bad grass weeds in it, glyphosate around now would be the ideal way to go before you start shedding some of the seeds. John, just to pick up on that point that Vijay made there in terms of some of the blackgrass scenario, in the ECT program, we work pretty intensively with a number of farmers across the country, and we produce videos and case studies of those, and it's on the website that Vijay was talking about, teagasc.ie/ECT. We worked with a guy, a farmer down called Bill Shanahan down in Waterford, who had blackgrass in a small field. You might maybe just outline how Bill's case, I suppose, in general, what he did over a number of years and how he fared at the end of that period of time.
Yes, Bill's case was quite unique in that he had blackgrass a number of years. In a nutshell, he switched from plough to min-till based. He imported blackgrass onto the farm. Not quite sure, probably around 2011, 2012, but it was 2016 before it was positively identified. So it went through an initial number of years unidentified. It looked like scourge, or it was misdiagnosed. So I suppose that was the first part of it, that it actually allowed a build-up of a seed bank of blackgrass to take place. So having been identified, they set about a plan to try and come out of it, and they changed the rotation and introduced the likes of stale seed beds and spraying them off with glyphosate. But during the course of the ECT project, early on, it was identified as herbicide resistance. So many of the chemical control measures that were tried failed as well. So basically, Bill switched to entirely spring barley. He upped the seed rate by 15 to 20%, and with the proviso that the canopy would compete with the blackgrass. And it was tracked. All of the weed counts were tracked during the course of the project, and it had success. Combining with the likes of the stale seed bed or cover crops, but there's the progression was steadily taking it out. But to come up with 100% weed free of blackgrass, I think there's no kind of easy answer. And again, a lot of extra work cleaning off machines and work on a plan was quite difficult as well. So I think Bill himself would be absolutely if you were to step it back in time, I'd say identification was the key to if it has been identified in time. If you had probably better biosecurity measures, which is easy to say now because we know more about it now, and good rotation is part and parcel of that.
Would it be fair to say, John, at the end of that experience, that at 5 years, it was I think it was maybe the 5th year of spring barley, that there was still blackgrass in it at a low level, but still blackgrass in the middle of the crop, and blackgrass around the pole that was in it, and there was blackgrass around the hedges. Given that level of blackgrass, would that have been enough to act as a reservoir to spread that further, through his combine or baler?
Yes, absolutely. And this is the key to it with blackgrass. Unless you're absolutely totally vigilant and can hand rogue out of the ditches or around the likes of the poles, which in that particular case has some ESB poles in the field, you will not be able to get to 100% control, and possibly and Bill might reiterate that himself, that if the field was to go back into grass for a minimum of 5 years, possibly that's the best way to deal with the problem in that particular case, because the seed bank had built up so much.
I think that was one of the things that actually struck me in one of the last few conversations I had with Bill, that he was pretty adamant at the start of the project. No, I wanted to keep it in tillage. This was the part of his tillage regime, and that's where he needed to be. But by the time we got to the end, I think he had come to the realization there was really no choice but to put it back into grass. I think that's the way he was going to go. So, lesson learned, to my mind at least anyway, where people say, oh no, I have blackgrass under control. Well, you really need to get down to the nub of it. Well, what does under control actually mean? And in Bill's, as Vijay said a second ago, under control should be zero control. I think that really should be it. John, just a final word from you in terms of the practices farmers should do maybe in the coming weeks to aid weed control on their farms.
I suppose the first thing, get out and walk your crops. It's very easy to put on the last spray and walk away then and come back into harvest. But I know for the likes of the winter barley at the moment, any grass weeds that are in the fields are apparent over the crop at the moment, and it's really important in the next 2 to 3 weeks that you're actually out in those crops and assessing them. I suppose firstly, if you do find that in the crop, there's 2 things I would say. One is map out where those areas are, be that dropping a pin on Google Maps or bring an area aid map and mark it on it, because that's really important to go back to the same spot to observe whether you're going to get on top of this or not. Secondly, just ask yourself, why is it there? Was it a miss, or was it a problem with the water rates or the timings, or why is it there in the first place? Secondly, I suppose, make sure the identity of whatever you're looking at is correct. And if there are very useful guides on the Teagasc ECT website, there are videos, both videos and PDF handouts. But if you can't identify it, just find someone that can, because if you have a proper identification, then that's the key to bringing it forward. If you can at all get ripe samples into Oak Park, VJ there will test them for you, and they're tested for herbicide resistance to the main agrochemicals, and that's really important information, I think, because you can't plan forward without that. If it's susceptible to all of the chemicals, then that's actually as important as not, because that's the only way you'll know what way to work in a rotation and chemicals. After that, the whole part of it is to try and deal with it. If it is something really an unhandroggable, sometimes that zero tolerance approach to burn it out, particularly with Italian ryegrass and blackgrass, is the best option in the long term, And finally, I'd like to say, many people just leave it at that, but the really, really important part is go back and revisit the field a few weeks later, because there could be some plants down low that will have come through later on as well. So you can actually miss some as well. So I think that's really, really useful to do as well.
So John, from what I'm getting from you there, essentially boots in the ground is what you're saying. There's no substitute for actually getting on the ground and walking through the crops. You can't do that from a tractor or cab. You just need to get down and have a look at it. Guys, John and Vijay, thanks very much for your time. I'm delighted you could join me, and we'll be chatting to you again shortly.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
So that's it for the show this week, and my thanks to John and Vijay for joining me on the show. For more information about these grass weeds, go to teagasc.ie and use the search box and type in grass weeds. You'll find all the information and videos you'd like in there. So finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.